What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I am doing a video talking about the decks that I think are going to be the best in May of 2022. A little bit into May, around like the third week of May, Dimension Force is going to come out here in the TCG, and it's bringing a couple of new strategies that I think are really good. But overall, I don't think the meta itself is going to change too much, besides a ban list possibly coming in. So, with considering no ban list possible changes, I'm going to make a list of decks I think are really good going into May, and as well as Dimension Force format. Again, a ban list could change everything, but who knows when we're getting that? It could be, 3 months from now. You just never know with Konami ban lists. But yeah, if this is something you guys enjoy, feel free to leave a like, subscribe. It really helps me and what I do here on the channel. Also, links down below for, our social media links, our Discord. If you do want to follow the channel more closely and maybe hang out with friends on the Discord, or maybe play Master Duel, Discord link down below along with all the other social media links. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into this sort of tier list of decks for May 2022. And we're just going to go straight down the list here, sort of explaining them a little bit each as we go along in order here. And we're starting with Dinosaur. So Dinosaur I think is really interesting. We have a Dinosaur player at our locals that he plays the deck quite a lot. Actually, we have a couple of Dinosaur players at our locals, to be honest. And they make the deck look good, right? Like, I think Dinosaur is actually a pretty strong deck that has some crazy combos and is pretty good at go second. There's quite a few things you can do with it. But if you look at like representation of the deck and how sometimes the deck just folds to one hand trap, like more so than other decks, it can fold to one hand trap, like an Ash on Misk, or like a Valor or Imperm on Overraptor. Sometimes the deck just folds. So it's a really interesting one to place, where I think the strength of the deck finds itself around tier 2, maybe even 1.5, when the deck's really doing what it wants to do. But just based off like representation and stuff, I'm gonna actually put the deck in Rogue. I mean, it's not seeing much play this format at all, but I do think the deck is pretty strong, so we're gonna put it in Rogue here. We have Alistair, or Shaddoll Invoke Dogmatica, more likely. This deck's like pretty okay. I think this is a pretty easy tier 2 in my opinion. It doesn't have any crazy representation, but I think the deck is strong. I do think the deck, its ability to play Super Poly in the main deck, I think is really good with this format, considering Despia are seeming to be very powerful, and of course, Prank Kids are powerful as well. And depending on how your extra deck looks, like I know some people have been playing Super Poly with either a Rocket Ride or a Weather Washer in their extra deck. I don't know if you have the space for that in the Shaddoll Invoke deck, or not even Shaddoll, like it's just Invoke Dogmatica now, right? So yeah, I mean, I think this deck is really strong. I think I can see it in tier 2. It's a 1-card engine deck that can play a lot of hand traps as well. Really fits sort of my style. One thing I'm noticing, in this tier list, every deck isn't here. Like, I know Dimension Force is coming out, and Pendulum are actually a deck I think will be really good in the meta, or like decent enough, right? So once I finish this tier list, I might mention some other decks and sort of place them with an image on the tier list as well. But yeah, so we're gonna put old Alistair at tier 2. Despia, I think they're an easy tier 1. Just from the few events that have been out since they've been released, they have been constantly performing at a pretty high level, despite initially some people thinking the deck might not be good enough. But the Patchwork deck is very, very powerful. Just Guardian Chimera on your opponent's turn is so good. I think both versions are pretty okay, the Brave version and without Brave, so there's some versatility there. Yeah, the deck just doesn't lose to some of the hand traps that have been going around a lot recently, like Nibiru, because we were in a very Praying Kids based meta. Yeah, Nibiru was super powerful, but they don't really care about it, and they can chain block a lot of their stuff that are normally weak to hand traps. So I think this deck has a lot going for it. I think it's easily a tier 1 deck with how it's been performing. It just, I believe, won the tournament down in Colombia. So yeah, Despia is looking like a very strong deck, and especially going forward, even after the ban list, right? So I think things like Prank Kids were probably going to get hit on the ban list, but Despia is going to ride scot-free, except maybe any hits to the Destroy Phoenix Enforcer package, which not even a lot of Despia decks are on that, right? So Despia definitely a solid tier 1, even after any ban list stuff. Predaplant's an interesting one. This is a Dimension Force deck. Honestly, I think this deck can do some really cool stuff, and its ability to play with a card like Super Poly is also fantastic in what could be a Despia format, right? So I actually think there's more going for this deck than what representation of the OCG has seen. again, even with that, I think it will find itself in the rogue tier. I don't know too much about this deck, but from what I've seen, and especially like numbers and people talking about it, I think it will be a good deck, but I don't think it's breaking anything in the meta by any means. Add Ignister. Now, I'm going to rank this one higher than maybe some people would. I don't think I'd call it tier 1.5 at all, but it is very similar to a deck like Evil Twin to me, which I rank Evil Twin very highly. I did just get a top 8 in Mendenhall, Mississippi, about like 3 or 4 weeks ago with the deck, so I know the deck can perform, and it's done well for other people as well, so this deck is very similar to Evil Twin. It is a 1-card engine that just plays a Shamata, I don't even know what I'm saying, okay? It plays a lot of hand traps. Yeah, it's a hand trap deck. I don't know what I just said, but yeah, it's a hand trap deck, and it just has a towers that is near unbeatable. You need to kaiju it or have access code to run over a 5k version. I feel like I lost my brain talking about this deck, but maybe that's just how powerful this deck is. It makes me lose my mind. Maybe I should put it in tier 0 up here a little bit, but yeah, honestly, I think the deck's pretty good. I think it's a solid tier 2. I personally don't play it because I think it gets a little boring. It does do just the same thing every time, and I don't want to clench every time I summon Dark Templar. So, but I do think the deck's very powerful. Now, Sword Soul, also interesting because it does have more versions. As far as looking at everything on this list, this is Sword Soul or based, depending on how you look at it. But honestly, seeing recent results, normally, like if you asked me a month ago, I would have put based a lot higher than Sword Soul. But Sword Soul Tenyi has been putting up some numbers. Like, it has been everywhere at all the regionals I went to, seeing at just like what is topping events. I think like the Sword Soul deck, what do I want to do with this? That's really interesting. I think it has reason to be like 1.5. I don't think it's tier 1. I want to put it at 1.5. I do think it's stronger than these, but I'm not quite sure. Like, every time I play against the deck, it really feels like the buy, to be honest, which is unfortunate because the deck is showing numbers. So maybe I've just played against Sword Soul players that aren't so great with the deck, because I do think it's a deck that requires a lot of skill. Actually, there are small like little nuances in your plays that really change how the deck sort of performs, in my opinion. I think this deck has a skill ceiling, despite, you know, initial things back when Burst of Destiny was released, where it was just Protos the deck. I think now the deck actually has some ceiling to it. So I actually think it's a tier 1.5 deck, and that's where I'm gonna put it. Drytron, I'm going to kind of put it in the same league here. I think the deck's very powerful. It still has crazy boards. I do think it's better than this, but I don't think it's quite up to Despia. But yeah, Drytron, again, they're a very good deck. I think the representation has been okay, but their like top conversion hasn't been amazing or anything. But I think Drytron have a solid place as a tier 1.5 deck in this meta. It's not doing fairy stuff anymore, but the Megalith cards are insane, and the engine itself is a lot like Dragon Rulers, where just your graveyard is your hand, and the resources in the grind game is quite insane. So I'm going to put Drytron tier 1.5, and here's Eldritch. Eldritch, again, when you look at these pictures down here, this could be Cyburst Eldritch, this could be regular Trap Eldritch, right? Like, there's no Cyburst gadget signifying a difference, but again, with the recent YCS Charlotte, honestly, I think Cyburst Eldritch and Trap Eldritch, similar to Sword Soul Tenyi versus Based, also find themselves in the same tier. Ooh, this is tough. It's either like the top of tier 1.5 or the bottom of tier 1 for me right now. I think Cyburst Eldritch has fallen off a little, while the Trap one has gained a little bit of steam due to getting second place. But just with that second place finish, though, I'm not quite ready to guarantee it's a tier 1 deck. I do think it's very strong. Skill Drain is a wild card for the Trap version, and the Pile version with Magician Souls and Cyburst Gadget is very, very good. I think I am going to put it as a tier 1 deck. I don't think it's the best of the tier 1 decks. In fact, I'm still sort of deciding on that myself, but it's a really good deck, so I'm going to put it at tier 1. My favorite deck, Fluandereeze. Yeah, so Sky Striker, okay, just kidding. Despite my bias against this deck, I despise this deck, as I'm sure many of you do. Even the people playing this deck, I'm sure at least half of you hate this deck, and are playing it just because it's pretty good. Where I want to put Fluandereeze? I don't know how confident I am in that. I think this deck is quite wild and very good, but with with Despia siding Banshee and Zombie World and Eldritch having a trap variant that's just very good versus the deck, I think Fluandereeze's matchups have actually gotten worse to a month ago, where, if I made this for April 2022, I think it would look a little different, but for May, this deck's matchups have become weird since the release of Despia, with Zombie World becoming an increasingly popular pick for the side deck. I'm going to put this as 1.5. The deck can still just lose to itself, but when this deck plays, I'm telling you, this deck is right here when it plays, okay? If this deck plays uninterrupted and does what it does, it is the best deck in the room. I hate this deck, but I'm going to put it in 1.5. I think its matchups across the board have gotten a little weaker. There are now, like, big competitors for it, so I'm going to put it in 1.5. Sky Striker, this is an interesting one. I think it's either 1.5 or 2. I think it has surprisingly good numbers in tournaments and decent representation, but as far as, like, the power level, I never personally feel it's quite as strong as these decks, but I do think it's a little better than these, so I'll put it in 1.5. Which, looking at the list, I think maybe some of this list should be shifted in the sense that, are there really that many tier 1.5 decks in a format, right? Like, usually it's tier 2 or 1. But honestly, like, I'm finding this format to be really weird, where there's so many great decks that aren't, like, the best decks, but they're also better than good. Like, they're great decks, and I think Sky Striker finds itself in sort of that category. Part of me wants to put it in tier 2, but I'm going to put it at 1.5. Tri-Brigade, this one's interesting. There is a new variant of Tri-Brigade sort of going around now, where there hasn't been enough time with it being released for me to really put it somewhere solid. Like, if this was right after the ban list or the start of April, this would have been tier 2, maybe even Rogue in my opinion, where I just thought it was really dead after Bird Up. The Bird Up variant I would say in tier 2, but there is a new Tri-Brigade variant running around that seems very good. Did I just say Tri-Brigade? There's a new branded version running around that I think is very good, actually. Like, I see it play, and I'm honestly impressed. And it's, if you look at, like, dueling book videos or matches, it is trending upwards right now. Like, the play is going up as of recording this video. Honestly, like, it's really tough for me to place, but I'm gonna put it at tier 1.5. I mean, that's just where we're at. I guess it's tier 1.5 format. Alright, Virtual World. This is not going to be 1.5. Virtual World, one of my favorites for sure. I have uploaded many Virtual World profiles on the channel. The deck has changed drastically when the Brave engine came out, or Adventurer engine, where now it's like, you can use 7 and 4 to be very good levels in this deck to do a lot of things. This deck pairs with Sword Soul. It is a very versatile deck, despite seeming not so much when it came out in Phantom Rage, right? But I'm going to put this in tier 2. I think there's even an option to put it in Rogue. I haven't seen it do much. It still tries to Scythe lock with Baron sometimes. Dump Scythe with Beatrice and then Baron it out. Honestly, I'll put it at the top of Rogue. I haven't seen it do much. Maybe it's gotten a couple here or there where it's okay. Shen Shen's a good card, but I don't know. I look at the other decks, and honestly, I just can't put Virtual World above Alistair. And I honestly think that even the Adignister version is, or Adignister deck is a little stronger. So I'm gonna put Virtual here. Prank Kids, alright. You already know. This deck, as far as where I'm placing it, I think where we're at in the format, I still want to put it above Despia. I think Despia has a good matchup into Prank Kids, honestly. Like, I think Despia in a 1v1 might be the stronger deck, and we sort of saw something similar at the Columbus tournament, where Despia actually won and Prank Kids took second, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I didn't actually watch the game, it's just what I've heard. But Prank Kids have been dominant this format. However, this is for May 2022. So I'm going to put Despia in front of it because I think into May, Despia will be the stronger deck. Either a ban list is going to take this deck out, no offense to the Prank Kid players, but I don't think this deck has much left, okay? They're going to hit this deck. There's no way they don't. This deck is... It has been actually very toxic this last month and quite annoying to play. I mean, it's not like the most oppressive meta deck we've ever had, right? Like, in terms of what a meta deck can do, I'd say the Prank Kids engine isn't anything wild. It's sort of cause for the format, where the format has made this deck really annoying because of the Brave engine and Destroy Phoenix Enforcer and even Magician Souls in some variant. Like, engine, the format, has made me hate Prank Kids more than I should, but this deck also always has its time win condition that makes me a little agitated just looking at it. But I'm obviously putting Prank Kids in tier 1. The only thing going to change this is a possible ban list again. So I've said that a bunch, but that is something big going into May 2022. Earth Machine. So there's also a Machina deck, and there's an Earth Machine variant as well. If it's going to be Machina, I would actually rate Machina as a tier 2 deck. I think it's strictly worse than Eldritch, just in a lot of ways. Your engine's payoff is more in follow-up. Like, the engine payoff for Machina, all it does is put a gear gigan up and search another gear frame, which isn't an interruption, and it's like good follow-up. So you actually have to, like, one, draw your traps in the midst of quite a few monsters, which Eldritch doesn't have to deal with. So yeah, if it's the Machina version, as cool as that deck is, and one I really considered taking to a regional, I think it's tier 2. Earth Machine, dang, like, I'm starting to think this deck's gonna be tier 1, okay? I know I'm a little biased, I love Earth Machine, but this deck with the Therions, which is another deck not here, is ABC. ABC is gonna be crazy with that deck as well. The Therions are going to be big, okay? Like, in Earth Machine specifically, like, that Machine Negate is gonna be great for Machine decks, 100%. Earth Machine has been putting up some numbers. It just won a regional. It's been getting consistent top 8s at regionals. Hasn't had any super big tournament success, but this deck is amazing. I'm telling you, like, I've played Earth Machine a long time, many different variants. I think this deck can do a lot. It can play through hand traps. It can run a decent amount of flex spots, but with that Therion Negate, I think it goes up a tier. So, like, without him, I'd put it here or here. With that new Negate, I think this deck is going to go crazy. At least for me. Like, I think it'll be under the radar. It'll be underplayed. It won't have the numbers, but I think when this deck does find a pilot who knows what they're doing, they're going to see success with it. I think this deck is going to be really good. And again, it has just enough flex spots to run the best hand traps in the format, which will probably be Bell, Ash Blossom, or you can even go traps. It can run Goes and Match, Rivalry of Warlords, and Skill Drain, which we've seen in more recent times. I think Earth Machine is going to be great, so I am going to place it in the tier 1 slot. Phantom Knight, again, this is interesting. I think at the start of Brave format, everyone was like, PK is going to be the best deck, but it didn't really turn out that way. I do still think it's tier 1, almost just off numbers. It's like, it's very tough between, this line is so thin. The line between tier 1 and 1.5, this last format has been so thin, where a lot of these, you could interchange them almost, but I'm going to put PK in tier 1. Just because, at least in my locals, it feels like the numbers haven't gone down. I see PK being played more than a lot of other decks. Is it topping as much as the others? Maybe not, but it's still getting a lot of play. It's still getting success. I'm going to put it in tier 1 because I think maybe tiering isn't always based on power, but I mean, how it's representing in the meta is a lot to say about the deck. So I'm going to put it in tier 1, while I think the power level might be down here. I think it's tier 1. Again, this line for PK especially, so bottom of tier 1, that's where we're going. Dinomorphia, this is not a meme. I think this deck's going to be amazing as well. This is going to be my trap deck of choice going into Dimension Force. That being said, tier 1.5. I don't think, I might put it higher in tier 1.5, definitely above Flunder. In fact, everything can go above Flunder. I will not give this deck the satisfaction of being that high on the list. I think Dinomorphia is low-key very, very good, and I think it will become more apparent as people play against it. There's a branded version of this deck as well, but I'm just talking about pure, like, I'm going to assume they're both around the same tier in my opinion. I think Dinomorphia is going to be amazing. They have an in-engine out with Sonic to things like Evenly Matched and, I almost said Lightning Vortex, Lightning Storm. Not a lot of trap decks have in-engine outs to that, and I think that is something that really sets this deck apart, and the engine itself is quite crazy. I think Dinomorphia are going to be very strong. Dragon Link, 1.5. I don't think anything in this deck is getting hit. I don't think the other decks getting hit will change its position too much. It's a great deck, which is why it's in 1.5, but, excuse me, I almost put Flunder ahead of it. That's why it's in 1.5. Yeah, I just don't think it's tier 1, but I do think it's very good, maybe 1.5. Honestly, we don't have enough decks in tier 2. Can anything here go to tier 2? Yeah, I'll put Dinomorphia in tier 2. Sorry to all the Dinomorphia fans, but the list just looks awkward. I'll put this deck in tier 2. Maybe there was some bias saying it was tier 1. Honestly, there's probably bias in this list all over, but again, it's my list, so that's probably why it's going to be that way. Gazelle Turbo. Salad. You know, similar to Adagnister, it's a deck that has like one card combos with a lot of hand traps, but I don't feel like its ceiling is quite there. I'm going to put it in Rogue. I know, like, it's an interesting thing when you, like, compare Salamangreat to Adagnister. Why am I saying Adagnister is better than Salad? Just, I don't know. I feel like Adagnister, this is an interesting topic. Why do I think Adagnister is better than Salad? I do think its ceiling is higher. I think the Towers is harder to out than Sunlight Wolf with a couple traps, because there's the sheer number of hand traps this deck can play and draw. It pluses more. It might not have the exact follow-up, but I feel like this deck can also OTK a little better. I feel like its lines have a couple of different things with, like, I don't know. I feel like Ignister's the stronger deck here, but maybe I'm sleeping on Salamangreat. A couple just to list that aren't on here. Pendulum, I think, are going to be quite good. I'll put them in tier 2. Yeah, I don't know much about the new Pendulum strategy, but they're getting support. There's no way they're weaker than they are now, right? So I think Pendulum tier 2. Evil Twins, I'd probably put in 2 or 1.5. It's kind of a tough choice there for Evil Twin. ABC, I'm going to initially put in tier 2, but this deck may surprise me. It might end up being like a 1.5 deck. But yeah, obviously, that's going to do it for this tier video of decks for May 2022. If you disagree, you know, leave your opinions down below. What decks you think are good? Did I rank one too high? Did I rank one too low? Leave me your opinions down below so I can read them and see what you guys think of the upcoming format. But if you did enjoy, again, leave a like and subscribe. Discord link down below if you want to hang out with our community. And with that being said, this has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.